What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another Overwatch League discussion video, and today we got some important information about this upcoming season, and that of course includes the thing that we've all been looking forward to seeing, and that is the full schedule for the 2019 season. But that's not all we got. We also got some other important info, which includes things like which teams are going to be playing at home arenas, map pools, and prizes for both stage playoffs and league playoffs, and some other minor things as well. And I want to go over all of the important things, obviously, but I'm sure a lot of you clicked on the video to take a look at the schedule, so I guess we'll kick things off with that. So since this is an entire schedule for like the entire year, I'm not going to just sit here and talk about all of the games and list them all off. We'll be here forever, and I know that we already got the week 1 schedule, so I'm kind of just going to put that up on the screen. You can pause it if you want to look at the matchups. Not going to go into much detail because I already have in the past, and I plan on making some future videos going into further detail about each individual matchup. But then, as we move on to week 2, when I take a look, there are a few interesting matches here and there, like we get to see the Atlanta Reign take on the Toronto Defiant. That should be a fun one. It's the battle of the black and red teams. We also have the Gladiators taking on the Paris Eternal. Should be a good one too. Next, when we move on to week 3, here you go. Here's what we're looking like for matchups. The Seoul Dynasty take on the Uprising. I think that one will be good. The Valiant take on the Vancouver Titans. I think that one shall be entertaining as well. And then we actually end off the week with the Excelsior taking on the Seoul Dynasty. They get to renew the rivalry, and hopefully it goes a little bit more in the Dynasty's favor because they lost every single time they played against the Excel last season. Up next in week 4 of stage 1, the one matchup that really excites me is the Reign versus the Gladiators, because I think a Surefour and Dafran duel would be epic. And I should probably bring this up. I'm not sure if you guys noticed already, but in some of these weeks, there will only be 3 games that are played in a day instead of 4. And also, some teams will only play 1 game in a week. I'm sure it'll be 2 most of the time, but sometimes they'll only play 1 instead of 2. So just keep that in mind. And finally, when I put the week 5 matchups on the screen, you'll notice another big change compared to last season, and that is during the final week of a stage, games are only going to be played on weekends. No weekday matchups will be played. And if I had to pick one game in particular that I really want to watch, it would have to be the Fusion versus the Eternal, because Shadowburn will be taking on his former team, trying to prove to all of them that it was a huge mistake getting rid of him. Also, I don't know how I missed this, but the Dynasty and the Spitfire play each other on that Saturday, which should be a good one because the Dynasty, they're a better team. They have Fissure, and kind of like with the Excel, they never beat the Spitfire once last season. So it'll be interesting to see if they can do better than they did last season against the Spitfire. Okay, now looking at stage 2, the first game that interests me is the NYXL versus the Fusion. It'll be a rematch of the league playoffs last season in the semifinals. Also, the Valiant take on the Shock. Fissure will be taking on the Gladiators for the second time. And I think that's just about it for this week. When moving on to week 2 of stage 2, let's see, the NYXL take on the Washington Justice for a second time, so we get to see Janice and Wizard Young take on their former team yet again. The Valiant take on Dafran. Also, there's our second battle of LA. I believe I missed the first one. I'm sorry I forgot to talk about that one. Every battle for LA is a key matchup. They're always really good. Oh, and I almost forgot to mention, the Vancouver Titans take on the Seoul Dynasty. That's one you don't want to miss. Then when we take a look at week 3, the NYXL take on the Fusion for the second time in 3 weeks. Then the next day, the Excel take on the Atlanta Reign, which means that we could see Dafran versus Pine and Dafran versus Sabiobi. That's definitely exciting. Then we get the exciting news that happens in week 4. We get our first home games out of Burbank in Dallas. That means that Dallas Fuel are going to play a home game. No, 2 home games, excuse me, against the LA Valiant and the Houston Outlaws. And also there will be other games played throughout the weekend. There will be 4 games played on both Saturday and Sunday. I'm expecting this to be a very hype event. And I'm assuming that the support will be overwhelming because there are a lot of seats, and I'm sure no one wants to miss out on this history of the first ever home game. So congrats Dallas Fuel, you're going to have a massive turnout and those fans are going to be cheering you on big time. And when finally looking at week 5 of stage 2, you'll notice that there will be weekday games played because there's only going to be weekend games when we go to Dallas. So that means we'll get 3 games on both Thursday and Friday. There's no matchups in particular that really excite me a lot. So now let's move on to stage 3, shall we? And the one week 1 game in particular that will be taking place in stage 3 that I am excited for is the NYXL versus the London Spitfire. Those teams always play each other super hard. Then when we take a look at week 2, the Dynasty are taking on the Atlanta Reign. We have the Fusion versus the Uprising. Should be very interesting. But then we get a super hype game on Saturday in week 3 when the Atlanta Reign take on the Philly Fusion. Carpe versus DeFran potentially could be happening. Also, the NYXL and the London Spitfire take each other on yet again. Moving on to week 4, the only matchup in particular that interests me is the Valiant versus the Spitfire. And now I'm going to move on, so if you want to take a closer look at this week 4 schedule, then pause the video right now. But moving on to week 5, you'll see we get even more home games, and this time they'll be played in Atlanta, Georgia, which means that the Atlanta Reign, a first-year Overwatch League team, will be playing home games against the Toronto Defiant and the Florida Mayhem. We'll also get to see the NYXL and the Philly Fusion and some other teams play as well. There's lots of expansion teams actually, which is super exciting. But I'm very happy that we're seeing home games in Atlanta as well, and I'm sure they'll be just as hype as they are in Dallas. And last but certainly not least, we have stage 4, and in week 1, the Valiant take on the Paris Eternal, which means we get to see Soon for the first time this season take on his former team. I'm sure that one will be quite emotional. Then the Valiant take on their rival Seoul Dynasty in week 2. It's another game looking out for if you're a Valiant fan, I suppose. The Fusion take on the Outlaws. That's another big-time rivalry. Those guys always play each other close. In week 3, we have the London Spitfire taking on the Vancouver Titans in the first match of the week. That should be a good one. And this is actually a big week if you're a Spitfire fan because they also take on the Houston Outlaws, who beat them a bunch of times in last year's season. Week 4 actually has some pretty meh matchups for me. Nothing too exciting. You have the Valiant and the Uprising, the Dynasty and the Fusion, and then the London Spitfire versus the Reign, I suppose, is another good one. DeFran gets to take on Bird, Ring, and Profit. But then the hype weekend happens in week 5 because the LA Valiant will be playing home games, and I'll be honest, this one surprises me, and I guess this means that the Gladiators are going to be the home team at Burbank. I don't know if that's exactly what that means. I'm pretty sure that's what it means, though. The Gladiators will be the home team in the Blizzard Arena. But anyway, the LA Valiant will be playing at the Valiant Homestead, and they will be playing against the Gladiators in, I guess, another battle for LA, this time at their home territory. And they'll also take on the San Francisco Shock, so they get to take on 2 of their biggest rivals in the same weekend. That is super hype. We also get to see the NYXL take on the Vancouver Titans. Runaway versus NYXL. This weekend is going to be one of the best of the year. Welp, that's what the 2019 regular season schedule is looking like. Make sure to let me know which matchups in particular are exciting you the most down in the comment section. And now let's move on to the stage 1 map pool. But before I get into which maps will be played, just know that the map pool for each stage has been expanded to 12 maps, which means we will see 3 of each map types. So starting off with Control, we will see Busan, Ilios, and Nepal. Then on Hybrid, it will be Hollywood, Kings Row, and Numbani. Then Assault will be Temple of Anubis, Horizon Lunar Colony, and Volskaya Industries. Then finally, on Escort, we will see Rialto, Dorado, and Route 66. And the tiebreaker map, just like last season, will be played on a control map that has not yet already been played in the current game we're watching. I really do like this map pool a lot because it features 3 of my favorite maps in the entire game, those maps being Ilios, Nepal, and Kings Row, which is a fan favorite for most people, I'd say, because it's really fun to watch the Widowmaker duels, and then the Reinhardts and the Zaryas. It's all really fun to watch. But also, while we're on the topic of stages, stage playoffs, the winners will receive $200,000, then the runner-ups get $100K. And while we're talking about playoffs, it's important to note that, kind of like with last year, the winners of the season playoffs will get $1 million, then the runner-ups get $600,000. And I think that just about covers all of the important information that was revealed to us today that I wanted to cover. There's some minor things that I did not go over, and if you're curious about them, I recommend that you read up on them on the Overwatch League's website. But now I'm done here, guys. If you enjoyed this content, I'd very much appreciate it if you could hit that like button. If you're new around here, consider subscribing and clicking the bell icon to enable notifications so you don't miss when my next video goes live. Make sure to let me know what you think of all of the information I covered today in the comments section. Thank you all so much for watching, and this is ATP signing out. Until next time, guys, see ya!